And good evening, Manitoba hockey fans, to episode 7 of the Manitoba Hockey Podcast here on G Show Productions, your home for hockey in Manitoba for the 2024-2025 season. We're brought to you by McKen Fasteners and Tools, Terraco, Can Central Sports Cars and Memorabilia, as well as Goaltenders, our four official proud sponsors here on the network. We'll be showcasing them throughout this episode, and yeah, we're cooking some good things up with our guest list in these next few weeks, these next few episodes. And the goal for me here is to, well, give you the most entertaining guests as possible from around the hockey world. And this guy coming up has a lot of knowledge too. It's Jared Down joining this edition of the Manitoba Hockey Podcast this week, as we had a chance to catch up a bit earlier this evening in a pre-recorded interview where Jared talks about just the AAA hockey scene. He's a co-creator, the co-owner, a co-founder of Double J Sports Media in Saskatchewan, based out of there. So we had a chance to talk about that, exactly what they're doing this season, what their plans are, and yeah, he gives his insight on, you know, his thoughts on the Manitoba U18 AAA Hockey League in terms of, the start to the season for these teams in that league. Teams that he sees turning it around that maybe aren't off to the best start. We also talk about, the teams near the top, potentially maybe not that much of a gap between first and second this year compared to other years. Me and him talk about that and so much more here regarding the AAA scene on the Manitoba Hockey Podcast for episode 7 here on G Show Productions. Without further ado, let's hear from the man himself and Jared Down on episode 7 here on gshow.ca. And it's Jared Down of Double J Sports Media, based out of Saskatchewan, joining this edition of the Manitoba Hockey Podcast. A little crossover. They also cover Manitoba AAA hockey, so I thought it'd be a perfect opportunity to have him on. Jared, great to have you on the show. And let's start with talking about Double J. I mean, you guys are into another year, did some pretty great things last year, covering the AAA hockey scene. What's things been like? Because as you were telling me, pretty hectic in your life right now and pretty busy.
Yeah, I know we're just trying to create more content. My personal life's been pretty busy between a move coming to Alberta and a job search and all that. Because obviously, as much as I would love Double J to be a full-time job, it's just not quite there yet. But yeah, we cover AAA hockey for the most part. Men's U18 is kind of our main focus right now. We've been to the last two Western regionals, kind of as the primary broadcasting partner there. Doing all the socials, interviews. We were in Winnipeg last year for one of the best AAA U18 games I've ever seen in my life. That gold medal game was phenomenal between Brandon and Saskatoon, and trying to come up with more content. We do some social media for the Saskatchewan U18 AAA League, and um, we recently started doing some power rankings, some independent power rankings, given our take on U18 AAA hockey. Initially men's, because with the CEA, or the Canadian Elite Hockey League, that they have on social media that does this top 20, and we just want to give it a little more in-depth look, as we're a little closer to these games and a little closer to these teams, and give our opinion on the top 10. And actually, tomorrow we're coming out with our first women's U18 AAA top 10, and that one will be Western Canada. So all 29 teams at the U18 level from BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. So there's a few Manitoba teams going to be on that list. I'm sure you'll be happy to see that. And just a little more fun. I know all these kids, they love the rankings, right? They're always talking about, oh, no, we beat a top 20 team in Canada, or we beat a top 10 team. So just to give kids more to talk about and some additional content, and working on a lot more there. But yeah, lots of good things coming here at Double J.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point you bring up about like the kids, the players, right? Like the ability that, places like G Show Productions, us and Double J and so many others have now the capabilities to produce this type of content to make these kids feel like they're pros as they continue their development is pretty cool to say the least. But for Double J, I mean, like you said, expanding into doing more content like that. Is this going to be so obviously the games in AAA, which, you and your partner in JD Hodden covered last year through Flow Sports, are there going to be more games that you guys are planning to broadcast this year? Is it going to be the workload pretty much the same in that sense?
No, we're hoping to try and get some, regular season games in. It's one thing, we're trying to make a little money on our end, but we're not trying to gouge teams either, right? And we understand that there's so much that is available in a team's budget to bring us in, and it can be challenging. So we're hoping to, get some teams together and maybe, make a weekend work out of a couple teams, whether it's in Saskatchewan or Manitoba. I know JD, he is the full-time play-by-play guy for the Moose U18 AAA team. So, we have a bit of an in there that I might go up and we might do a kind of a show for them. But yeah, it's hard to say. We're hoping to be back at the Western Regionals this year in Kenora, Ontario. Still waiting on trying to get into that, but we hope more games for this year. If not, we got to focus a little more on the content wise. Hence, power rankings. We have our 3 stars of the month for Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta coming out shortly here. As we're already almost into November, so time's flying.
Yeah, time is flying for sure. I was thinking to myself the other day, right? Like we're already at Halloween on Thursday and we're almost 2 months away from this
Yeah.
calendar year being over. But to start things off, we'll start off with the Manitoba U18 AAA Hockey League. The Brandon Wheat Kings, the defending champs, off to a 7-1-0-0-1 start. This is a team last year that didn't lose a single regulation game in their league's play. And they're only 3 points back of the league leading Winnipeg Bruins. Your overall thoughts this year on the start for teams like the Bruins, like the Wheat Kings, and teams you're liking so far from this year's Manitoba U18 AAA scene?
Well, like you mentioned, it's weird to see, 2 losses now here by Brandon this season. A team that had a tremendous year last year, had a lot of solid players that have moved on to the WHL, moved on to the MJHL, and some still remaining with their team. But apologies here, my cat
Oh,
is
no
a
worries.
little stir crazy from this colder weather out. But um, yeah, so Brandon's off to a solid start there. Winnipeg Bruins, we had them just looking at our rankings from last week. I think we had them. Sorry, I just have to pull this up here. Um, we had them, the Bruins at 8, Brandon at 7, and Parkland at 6. Parkland's had a few losses here recently, but a team like Southwest, they're on a 6 game heater. Bruins on a 9 game heater. Eastman's kind of rebounded a bit here at the 4 game heater. There was a lot of parity at the start of this year. Some teams just trying to separate a little bit that top half, making some waves. Winnipeg solid as ever. They've been one of the better teams over the last 4 or 5 years for sure, and have had Brandon's bat or had Brandon's number the last couple of seasons, bouncing them in the playoffs, except last year when they finally got their revenge. So it's hard to say if I have a favorite in Manitoba right now. Teams are still in that feeling out process. There's obviously might have had a few kids away at the start of the year, whether it's in junior or with their respective camps. So now that we have everyone back and for the most part healthy, it's now we're gonna start to see where the teams kind of position themselves in the standings.
We take a look at last season, right? And overall, the standings looked pretty tight for the most part, but there was quite a gap between Brandon and Southwest from first to second place. Brandon finishing with 87 points and Southwest finishing with 58, also tied with the Winnipeg Wild for a second there. It's going to be hard for anyone to sustain or replicate that type of record that Brandon had. But do you see more of the same this year in terms of one team potentially separating themselves from the pack at number 1 to 2, or do you see more of a tighter race for that number one spot down the line this year in Manitoba?
I think it's going to be a little more tighter than that one spot. Brandon's always going to have a solid team. They have a strong population pool to pull from, and they're very well coached there. That's a big thing in this league. Same with the Winnipeg Wild. Bruins have been a team that seem to always have a solid regular season and just can't seem to, for whatever reason, put it together in the playoffs. And I think that top, the Brandons, the Winnipegs, Southwest is, they're usually in the top six there. I'm interested to see if Parkland can hang on into the top group of this season. A lot of years you see them in that 6 to 10 range. They seem to have a solid group so far this season. It'd be interesting to see if they can stay up there. Um, it's a little shocking right now for the Winnipeg Thrashers to be down to 9. I know it's still early, but they're another team. Those Winnipeg teams tend to be always playoff teams, right? And Thrashers do have a history of winning this league, and that's the joys of U18 hockey. Teams, they fluctuate based on kids coming up, and I would say it's going to be a little more parity in this league this year from what I've seen so far. Um, right now the Bruins are doing their best to try and pull away, but right now I would bet there'd be 3 or 4 teams that could be number one come season's end.
You mentioned, of course, Parkland, and Quinton Fisk right now is off to a phenomenal start for them, leading the league in points as well as in goals. Last season, he only had 17 points in his first year. Obviously, a big and a drastically different start to his year this year. Have you had a chance to see him play at all? Have you had a chance to study up on this kid? Are we seeing something that could be sustained this year with him having such a hot start?
Well, anytime you have 15 goals in 11 games, it's going to grab your attention. And, he's obviously, taking advantage of his second season here, excuse me, with the Parkland Rangers and, the Dauphin Manitoba product. He's a big kid, at 6'2", 180 is what they have him listed at. And, that's a big boy for U18 AAA hockey. And I think he's going to be able to keep it up. You've seen him. Just looking at his game logs here, he's got 2-0-2-1, 2-0-0-2-2-3-1 for goals, and he's doing it against whether it's a good team or a weaker team to start this year, right? So he's
Yeah.
doing it against everyone. I would imagine he keeps it up, and if he stays at this pace, that's going to be a record pace. So he's definitely going to grab eyes of scouts, whether it's WHL or MJHL, and even college. College is scouting really early these days, as early as the U15 level.
Oh yeah.
Trying to pick kids. Hey, before the selling point was, hey, don't sign the WHL. We want you to come here, right? And now there's a little more flexibility on these kids' parts, but he's definitely off to a good start this year, and he's opening doors for his future. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, one name that I know comes to mind in terms of him picking the NCAA over the WHL was this year's first overall pick in Macklin Celebrini. So yeah, there's definitely been more and more kids going that college route, and can't wait to see what Quentin Fisk, his season for the rest of the way, is in store for this year for Parkland. But there's been a team that's been added back into this league, the Central Plains Capitals. Currently the 12th ranked team in this league, the Kenora Thistles, coming back this season, dead last with a 1-9 record. Your thoughts on them adding back Central Plains, what it's done to the landscape of this year's league, adding them back?
Well, it's funny that a team like Central Plains, it was out of the league the last couple of years due to enrollment numbers, and we actually had um, the president of the Manitoba League on our first episode of the season, and I was unfortunately able to make that episode. JD did the interview on that one, but he brought to our attention that Central Plains actually has one of the smaller um, areas to draw from for players, and has a lot lower of enrollment in hockey, and that makes it really tough to be competitive. But it's good to see them back in the league. it gives more kids an opportunity. Whether the team succeeds or not, you're still playing in front of scouts. You're still playing these top teams that these scouts are coming to watch, right? So it's good exposure. It allows more kids to play at a higher level, and I'm happy to see them back. And it's funny, that Portage area is, you think of the Portage Terriers and the run they've had the last 2, 3 decades in the Manitoba Hockey League and the success they've had. It's funny that it probably comes down to zoning, but it's funny to see, you know, Central Plains struggle to get those numbers. You would think with a blossoming junior team that there might be a few more enrollments, but I would imagine that a lot of that is contributed to just population.
Yeah, and that is a huge difference when it comes to when we're talking about the Manitoba hockey and Saskatchewan hockey, landscapes, because I know in Saskatchewan you're not tied to one zone specifically. In Manitoba in hockey here, and at every level, from what I've seen, you need to first, try out for your catchment team. And yeah, we see it a lot in female as well, those rural Manitoba teams taking a lot of talent in from the Winnipeg teams as those teams make their cuts. So, yeah, we'll have to see what Central Plains has in store this season if they can, improve. And yeah, also I think makes it even more important to have that good feeder system and building that foundation there right beforehand at U15. But you spoke about the Winnipeg Thrashers, a bit surprised that they're in ninth place. Is there any team, that's maybe middle of the pack near the bottom of the standings, maybe outside of Winnipeg that you see getting better as the season goes longer? Is that kind of the team you're looking at that has the most room to improve based on their ceiling with this roster?
Well, if you would have asked me last week, when we put our power rankings out, I would have probably told you the Eastman Selects, a team that had a great start to the season last year, was looking like they're going to be one of the top teams in the league and kind of fell off towards the second half of the year. And so far, there's only a couple games in when we did our first power rankings. They had a bit of a sluggish start, but they've won 4 straight now. They've climbed themselves into six, and they're a team that probably going to maintain, I would imagine, in the middle of the pack, if not climb to the top quarter of this league. But that would be my other team that I'm kind of pointing out as a team to, look to climb the standings.
Since you cover all of AAA really here, Western Canada and whatnot, we've talked about Manitoba, but talking about, like Saskatchewan, the AAA league there in Alberta, I guess we'll start with Saskatchewan. Your thoughts and I guess the things that have stood out to you so far.
First off, I guess, yeah, it's going to be, warming off to a slower start in that league has been a bit of a surprise to me. They're not quite in the top three that they normally kind of have been since coming into the league. Swift Current is a team that, they've constantly been in that 4 or 5 spot every year playoff time, it seems like, and they had a great group of guys this year. They got the luck of getting Bernie Weston back, a third-year goalie who is a smaller goalie drafted by the Swift Current Broncos. Really quick, he's going to be a rock for them in that league this year. And they got Jace Eglin back, another third-year player that drafted to the Wenatchee Wild, and he came back. I thought for sure he would be gone to Wenatchee. I think he might have been holding out potentially to head west, maybe Brooks of the AJ next year, and just opted out of going to the SJ and came back to Swift Current for his third season. He's lighting the league up this year. They had 5 guys at the WHL Cup that this past weekend with Team Saskatchewan. So they had a good young core as well. They get the Kerwin twins back that were supposed to be in Battleford and unfortunately got sent back for their reasons, but great for the Swift Current Legionnaires. Regina Pats, another team that's going to be one to look for. They got a few key guys back in Dave Sturkacz and Taylor Tabashinak in net. We're gonna see if they can finally get through. They've lost in the league finals 2 years in a row to the Saskatoon Blazers, a team that, again, well coached.
Yeah.
Got a great young player in Blake Chorney who's going to be a force in the WHL soon to come. A well coached staff there with Troy Walkington. We've got to know him well through the last 2 Western regionals, and yeah, it's been exciting start. A lot of teams that didn't have as heavy of a WHL Cup presence got a lot of games in this past week. So we've seen the PA Mentos climb to the top of the standings. They're on a 4-game winning streak and a big matchup tonight between PA and the Blazers. Both teams coming in with a 4-game winning streak there. And the league's always had a lot of parity, it seems like, with, Regina and Saskatoon kind of being the top two the last couple of years. But, it seems like any given night in that league, anyone can beat anyone. And it's been some great hockey the last couple of years. And looks like it's going to be another great season.
Yeah, and I think it was the 2021 or 2022 WHL draft. The Blazers had so many players that were going off of
Yeah.
their boards. So yeah, this has been a league that's produced or has seen a lot of talent that has been drafted to WHL teams and can very well play. They're going to be exciting to see how things progress there as the season goes along. But I will end off with the Alberta Elite Hockey League. Edmonton Junior Oilers Blue. Undefeated through regulation play so far. A few
Yeah.
OT losses in there. Okotoks, the Oilers starting off strong, leading the South Division. Overall thoughts to the start of the season over there through about 8 or 11 for these teams.
Yeah, Alberta's been Alberta's a tough league. I've always had a little more of harder time gauging the Alberta League. We've seen some great playoffs the last couple of years. In the last 2 years, it seems to be some trends where, you know, about mid-November, you look at the standings and if you were to turn a blind eye and not look at it again until January, February, you would see a big shift. There's always a few teams that start off hot, kind of fall off, a few teams that sluggish starts that come back hot. And that's start the season this year. We've seen a few teams that came out to, red hot starts, but they weren't playing necessarily the top teams in the standings quite yet. And, that's nothing against the teams that they were playing, but there's a few more teams like Okotoks that was tested and, got some big wins against some of those higher seeded teams. And a lot, I guess I'm gonna use the word parity again. It seems like I might throw that around a lot, but Alberta's been good this season, and I think a team like Airdrie would be interesting to see if they can hang on to the top of the standings. The Edmonton teams always seem to be tough, and the Northwest Flames, a team that is well coached as well, and they've won the league 2 years ago there, and they have a lot of good players. That if you look at the AJ, MJ, and SJ, there might be a lot of that team scattered across those leagues, but in terms of other teams, St. Albert off to, you know, a bit of a sluggish start from what I've seen out of the past. I'm sure they'll find their groove, and it's still early. It's hard to gauge in Alberta, but looking forward to seeing how that one shakes out as well.
Well, slow start for St. Albert. I think if this is a slow start, they'll take it for their offense. 41 goals for most in the North Division right now. And yeah, the Calgary Buffaloes ended up making it through the Pacific region last season to make it all the way to the
Should say a slower start from what I've seen out
oh,
of St. Albert,
for
but
sure. For sure. No doubt about it. Got what you meant. I just thought that we're taking a look at the goals for category, but Jared, maybe we catch up at some point, later on in the season to check in with how things are going covering the AAA scene. But until then, enjoy all the great hockey coming your way, as well as your co-business owner, partner, as well as JD Hahn. Say hi to him for me. And yeah, thanks for coming on the show. Always a pleasure getting to talk to you, man.
yeah, it's great to have me on, and I expect some skepticism and when we release our power rankings tomorrow in the women's Western Canadian women's U18 AAA. You're a little more dialed in, especially in Manitoba at that level. But hopefully, we can somewhat make you happy with what we come up with.
Hey, I'm excited to see it. And if you're not making the rankings a bit controversial, well, are making power rankings at all? Jared Down,
Exactly.
edition of the Manitoba Hockey Podcast, joining episode 7. And it's Jared Down joining this edition of the Manitoba Hockey Podcast, co-founder, co-creator, co-owner, whatever word you want to use to describe the man. He is that of Double J Sports Media, located in Saskatchewan. And yeah, like he said, they're going to be releasing newer content this year, stuff they didn't really do last year, like releasing the power rankings, as well as going into the female AAA scene a bit, and going to be releasing that top 10 ranking, like Jared talked about, coming up this week. So, yeah, it's actually coming tomorrow. It's going to be a lot of fun to see what they got in store there. But as for the Manitoba U18 AAA hockey scene, we've already talked about it. But yeah, the Winnipeg Bruins on top right now with a 9-1 record. 9-1 record, that is. One of their wins coming in a shootout. The Southwest Cougars, Parkland Rangers, as well as teams like the Brandon Wheat Kings, Winnipeg Wild, all looking to keep pace with the league leaders right now, heading into another week of action. And in fact, in terms of the games that are going to be going on coming up this week for the league, as we take a look at the final remaining games of the month of October. Play is going to resume in the league tomorrow with 4 matchups on tap. The Capitals taking on the Bruins, the Hawks taking on the Lightning, the Thrashers taking on the Wild, and the Chiefs taking on the Cougars. Only one game is going to be played on a Halloween night. That's the Eastman Selects taking on the Interlake Lightning, as that game will be played in Sungrow Center at 8:30 p.m. on Halloween night. As for the point leaders, we mentioned his name, Quentin Fisk, 23 points in 11 games played so far, 15 of those being goals. He's got the best points per game average out of these players, as you can see here. Jonah Lemoyne with the second best points per game average, with an impressive 17 points in 9 games played, just under 2 points per game. As for the goaltending leaders, I'm pretty sure the asterisk, I'm going to take a look right now. I'm pretty sure that means rookie, as we take a look. Yes, indicates a rookie. So, what a start to the season for Brandon Wheat Kings goaltender Brady Lowe. Their team might have, dropped a few games to start off this year, but he hasn't had one of those losses. A shutout so far on the season, and his 3-0 record to go along with a .949 save percentage. Best goals against average so far in the league. Another rookie in this top 5 is for the Bruins, and Zach Matheson, who's been big time so far. 7-1 through 8 games as a rookie for the best team in the league right now. 900 save percentage right on the dot. In terms of the Manitoba Junior Hockey League, it's the Selkirk Steelers who are still on top of the standings in the East Division. In that league, take a look. Yes, so the Pistons, a few points behind them with 2 games in hand. They're in good position right now to potentially take over that first place position in the East Division if they continue to go the direction they are going in, at least challenging Selkirk for that top spot. Already early on in this season, right now, in terms of the action going on in the league, there are only 2 games on in the league tonight, as it's the Neepawa Titans taking on the Selkirk Steelers, tied 1-1 right now in the final 3 minutes of that one. In terms of Weiwei Sikapo, the Wolverines taking on the Winnipeg Freeze tonight as the Wolverines. Currently in the driver's seat, up 3-1 with 2:51 left to play there in that third period, with a chance to move up to 5 wins on the season, barring something unexpected happening there. But in terms of the stats leaders, most of them have been the Selkirk Steelers, belonging to them so far. There's a tie for 5th in points between Paranuzzi and Witham, as you can see there, with 18 points each. Paranuzzi with 2 games in hand on Witham. so a bit of a better points per game average. But the story so far this season have been players like Owen Warnick and Cameron Bellinger, or Bollinger, as I should say. Warnick with 15 games played, 22 points, 2 more goals than Bollinger, but Bollinger with 1 less game played and the same amount of points there. So some high-end talent among the top of the MJHL standings, or stats leaders, as I should say. Christian Green right now for the Steinbach Pistons enjoying a 942 save percentage with 2 shutouts and a 7-1 record, a 7-1 record. Cole Sheffield, as many games played as Green has goals against, a 936 save percentage so far this season with a 9-3 record. And Dubinsky Dubinsky, goodness, with an undefeated record so far to start off this year. In terms of the Winnipeg High School Hockey League and the Winnipeg or the Manitoba Women's High School Hockey Leagues, they had a chance to, of course, continue their seasons last weekend, and we touch in on the Oak Park Raiders as we start off with them to take a look at our Platinum Promotions Division standings here, as you can check them out on gshow.ca. A 3-1 record with 13 goals for and only 8 goals against. They don't have the best goals for against differential in the league, though. That belongs to the Westwood Warriors, who, yes, have played 2 less games, but really impressive start off this year. 14 goals for, only 4 against. The Stonewall Rams at the bottom of the standings there. Steinbach with the same amount of points as they have, but Stonewall with a significant amount of more games right now at this point in the season. But if we take a look at like the goals for, goals against so far in this league, really no team is, terrible by just looking at the stats. Like, there's no team that truly looks like they don't belong to be there so far. We'll have to see how that shakes out as the season goes along low in the Platinum Promotions Division. As for the Winnipeg Free Press Division, the Belleville Barracudas, 4-0-1 this season so far to start things off. A +7 goal differential, which ranks top in this league. Belleville, always seeming to be a program that's usually going to be in that mix of things. They started off with 6 straight semifinal appearances since returning back in 2014, 2015 as a program. So from then until I believe 2021, 2022, when that team made it to its 2nd straight championship after capturing its first in school history in 2019, 2020. But they're not alone near the top of those standings, as the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Canadians are 1 point back of them with 1 regulation loss on the season. That is the difference so far. Belleville with a bit of a better goals for numbers compared to Pierre Elliott Trudeau. Near the bottom of the standings, though, we cut off their name by accident. I'm not going to try to readjust it right now, but the Leo Remillard Renards, 3 losses in a row to start off the year, but 10 goals for, 14 goals against. Again, we take a look at the standings here. No team really out of place, it seems like. Pretty competitive overall in this league to start things off. But in this league, it hasn't gone so well for the bottom tier teams to start off in terms of where they are in the standings, as the Kildonan East Reveres and the Churchill Bulldogs both sit at 0-2 with goal differentials that they'd hopefully like to see improve as this year goes along. For Linden Christian, they're a bit better than these 2 teams so far. They got a win on the year, but a -12 goals. 4 goals against differential. No problem so far for Louis Riel, as they have opened up as the favorites by far in this division. 42 goals for in 4 games played. That is mental, to be honest with you. We take a look at those numbers. They're averaging 10.5 goals per game. Now, does that continue as the season goes along? No, you have to think that other teams in this league are going to start to play them better, and that their competition's going to get stiffer as the season continues to get settled in here. But I guess, teams to keep an eye on are going to be the Glen Lawn Lions, a team that's been in the Winnipeg Free Press division before. What type of squad do they have in store this season? And I'm also, curious to see how those country teams will do in the Warren Wildcats and the Lorette Scorpions. Always teams that play with the physicality, especially Lorette, and we'll see how big of a challenger those teams will be as this season rolls along here. Moving into the Manitoba Women's High School Hockey League now. Not much has changed here in the standing. It's still the Glen Lawn Lions on top. For the CJS Olympians, though, this is pretty darn impressive. I mean, look at that. 10 goals for 0 against. Domination defensively for this team to start off. It has not been domination defensively for the West Kildonan Collegiate Wolverines and Churchill Bulldogs, though, as they both sit as the only winless teams remaining here in the Manitoba Women's High School Hockey League Division 1 standings. As for the top of the Division 2 standings, the Selkirk Royals still remain as the only undefeated team in this league. The Gophers and Broncos separated by 3 points from them, so a win away from tying them in the standings. The River East Kodiaks, the worst team to start off, they'll look to work away at that goal differential as they're currently at a division worst -7. As for Division 3 in this league, PCI Saints 5-0 to start off this year in regulation. Lost their only game in overtime. In overtime, that is 22 goals for those, 7 goals against. The only team, as you can see there, with as good of a goals against number as them are the Dakota Lancers. But in fact, they don't have the same amount of firepower, it seems so far, producing on paper. As for the penalty minutes, though, Dakota, way more disciplined team than PCI among those top 2 teams, as they have taken the most penalties in the league. But hey, if your penalty kill is good enough, and it's really good, it's a big strength on your team, these teams don't mind taking as many penalties as I haven't seen the games. Maybe it's based on more physicality, or maybe it's a mix of both that and lazy stick penalties. Who really knows? We'll have to go out to see a game for that team at some point this season. That's going to be on my bucket list for sure, as well as many of those teams in the high school hockey leagues here in the province of Winnipeg. Of course, the websites to all of these leagues, websites for you to check out the full stats, scores, and all news surrounding these leagues available for you, as you can see them on the screen there as this episode has rolled on. We're going to move into the University of Manitoba now. Check out their full stats, and I guess not full stats since they don't really post team stats from what I've seen, but all the latest news surrounding Bison's programs for the U of M. Be sure to check out gobisons.ca. But it was a really great weekend for this team. 4-1 win and a 2-0 win against the MacEwan Griffins to get back into the win column. Hadn't been there since, the opening weekend of their regular season on the 12th and 13th. So far for this women's team, this is a team with some really good talent that they've built. I'll have to do, of course, some more research in terms of the talent and who plays on who exactly in this U Sports League. But there's a lot of other good talented teams too, not just, the U of M. And I'm curious to see how this team is going to fare when they start to gel more together and start to put things together more, because they got players that have played at some high levels before that have contributed big times for those squads that they played on in the past. And I think this is a step in a good direction, the right direction for this U of M women's team, who, of course, Sarah Zachariah has taken over as interim head coach this season. We'll see how hard of a buy-in she can get from this group, as they're back into the win column for the first time since the 13th in U Sports play. As for the men's Bisons team, well, they picked up their second win of the season in a pretty good weekend for them against the McEwen Griffins. Sure, they ended off with a disappointing 4-3 loss, but to get back in the win column is huge, especially after losing in a close one to end off your weekend last weekend. So this was a road trip for this U of M team. They went over to McEwen to play this team. As we take a look where exactly this was played, the arena on it. It was played in Edmonton, Alberta. It doesn't show the arena exactly, but a weekend where this team looks to build off of, and on to this weekend coming up where they'll be back at home against the Saskatchewan Huskies, and then the next weekend, of course, taking on the Mount Royal Cougars as the start of a 4-game homestand for this men's Bisons team. We're going to end off with just breaking some news about what's to come on our network coming up this week, besides this, tomorrow, Thursday, as well as Friday. But before I show you that, I want to tell you about as you just saw it there. We'll get to that in just a moment. But this is the 2024 Female U18 Program of Excellence final roster that's been announced for quite a while for this Team Manitoba squad that's going to be competing in the Manitoba, or in the women's U18 nationals tournament coming up starting on November 3rd. So this weekend for this Team Manitoba team, they have some stars on them from quite a few different places. When we take a look at MFHL teams, Rio Pierre really stands out there from the Winnipeg Avros, as well as looking on defense, a team captain for those Winnipeg Avros in Evie West, who's such a great skater too. In net, two MFHL goaltenders there. Shayna Bannister, who is now playing actually for the Balmoral Hall program. Played for Pilot Mountain last year. She's a strong player, good skater that can do some good things with the puck. And then, really all around this team, when we take a look at it, we're talking about really good skill, high-end skill, but a good leadership throughout. Izzy Mann, the captain for her team this season for the Winnipeg Ice, as for a player in Evie West, team captain for the Winnipeg Avers, and the list goes on. All these players may not wear letters on their respective teams, but they can lead in different ways, whether that's on the ice with their play, off the ice with their personalities, or a mix of both. And taking a look at this coaching staff, Christine Bumstead is going to be head coach, and with her some pretty strong coaches along her side, including Carissa Kirkup coming from the Brandon Weekings, who she's won 2 championships with their U15 AAA female programs. So I think Team Manitoba has all the right pieces in place to be able to go out and have a good showing. They're solid in net. They got some high-end skill on the defense, where you can expect, for if you tune in to watch that team, I think some really good puck movement, as well as some really good responsible players in their own end, and then some really good high-end skill. Some youth, some experienced players that have played at that tournament before, players that are just coming in, but all players that possess high IQ and have different strengths, whether that's Rio Pierre's blistering shot, or if we're talking about the skills a player like Shayna Bannister possesses with her skating ability, or just taking a look at the roster again, how a player like Jessica Anderson, her puck carrying ability, her shot, how that'll translate, just really good high end skill overall from this female U18 Team Manitoba squad that gets set to kick off their nationals, I believe, coming up on November 3rd. Be sure to check out Hockey Manitoba, their website, if you want to check out the full details there. We may even put in a link to where you can see their schedule for their games and all that. If it even exists, I'll have to check it out. I've tried looking in the past, but nothing ever really comes up with much success for me when I've tried to look into the stats for that tournament in the past. Actually, it has. I just forget exactly where to go. But in terms of what we got coming up for schedule this week for the rest of our Week 8 podcast, the Buffaloes podcast returns tomorrow morning for episode 8 at 8 a.m. The Manitoba Major Junior Hockey League podcast, the same thing, 8 a.m. except for on Thursday on Halloween 2024. And the MFHL podcast, episode 6, dropping at 1 p.m. And our first piece of content to be released here on our YouTube channel and on our website here in 2024 in November. As for myself, Graham, the G Show Forsyth, it's been a lot of fun here tonight on the Manitoba Hockey Podcast. We'll be back again next week, time pending to be announced at this point, but the date is set. We will be back on Tuesday next week for an all-new edition of this podcast where you can be sure to hear from more great voices from around the amateur hockey scene here in the prairies and the province of Manitoba, from either players, coaches, or maybe some other people. Who knows? Details will be out about that episode next week. Stay tuned for that. I want to thank Jared Down for coming on this edition of the Manitoba Hockey Podcast and being the guest, and to our sponsors in Terraco, Make Hand Fasteners and Tools, Goaltenders, and Can Central Sports Cards and Memorabilia for sponsoring another edition of the official Manitoba Hockey Podcast here on gshow.ca on gshow Productions. Thank you to you, the viewer, for tuning into this one as well. If you enjoyed this one, like I said, we're going to be back on Tuesdays. We air this podcast on Tuesdays. We didn't last week due to, some scheduling issues. But yeah, next Tuesday it'll come out if you enjoyed this one and want to know when they come out through YouTube. Well, subscribe and turn on notifications, and that'll do the trick. Helps support us and means you won't miss any content like this and anything else we put out here in the future for future episodes on G Show Productions, your home for hockey here in Manitoba in 2024-2025. I've been your host, Graham, the G Show Forsyth, giving you the salute, waving so long, and peacing out on this Tuesday night, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Stay safe out there. Have a wonderful and safe weekend, and enjoy all the great hockey coming your way. Good night, everybody.